A young man plans elaborate crimes he believes will net him millions of dollars. As he puts his violent schemes in motion, the lives of innocent people and police officers mean nothing. The FBI tries to bring him to justice, but they soon find themselves up against a criminal enterprise.
Caught in the act, a disguised bank robber hurled explosives at police and disappeared in a hail of bullets. When police identified the suspect, they connected him to an armed kidnapping, but they couldn't find him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The suspect's behavior was organized but unpredictable. Everyone leaves a trail, and agents hoped they could pick up the right one.
Martinez, California is a suburban city 30 miles north of Oakland. As dawn broke on October 15th, 1993, most of Martinez was still asleep. Nobody noticed the dark figure creeping across the rooftop of a downtown bank. He carried a top-of-the-line cordless power saw and drill with special motors that reduced noise. He seemed to know exactly where to cut into the roof. The masked man exploited a flaw in the bank's security system. The alarm was unable to detect movement in the crawl space between the roof and the bank's ceiling, allowing him to move freely. Just below was the bank's office. It was rigged with motion sensors. He knew if he descended below, he'd trip the bank's alarm. The masked man also knew bank employees would arrive in a few hours and deactivate the security system. He settled in and waited for them. Hours later, Martinez residents began their morning commutes. Two miles from the Martinez Bank, in the city of Pleasant Hill, a police operator answered a seemingly unrelated emergency call. Someone saw two Hispanic males entering a supermarket with guns in their waistbands.
Copy that, 220 on a move.
It was just before 9 a.m. Pleasant Hill police officer Bob Lauderdale responded to the supermarket.
M1, who's the reporting party?
He's still on the line, a payphone.
Well, my dispatcher advised that the person making the call was calling from a public phone directly across the street from the store.
He just hung up. He gave his name as Kyle Farrell.
I noticed a black male adult standing in front of the phone booth. was wearing a black varsity type jacket with tan sleeves and carrying a full face motorcycle helmet.
Officer Lauderdale and Sergeant Gary Ezel entered the supermarket to investigate. They would begin an aisle-by-aisle search for the suspects. Back in the city of Martinez, the masked man had waited 3 hours in the crawl space above the bank's ceiling. Bank employees were preparing to open to the public. They deactivated the alarm when they arrived.
How's
Hi.
vacation?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Very relaxing.
Be back at the office.
Not really, but
The masked man watched a teller punch in her access code to the ATM room, where she would fill the machines with cash. It was his cue for a dramatic entrance. The door automatically locked behind the teller. The robber threatened to kill her co-worker if she didn't open the door. Then he opened it himself. The bank's manager was in the break room. She heard the commotion and glass breaking.
Put the money in the bag! Go to hell! Hurry up! Put the money in the bag!
She slipped out and called 911.
Hurry up! Put the money in the bag! Come on!
Report of a 211 bank in progress. 6678 Alhambra
Dispatch
Avenue.
alerted Martinez police.
The manager of the bank is advising that she heard someone in the other room shouting, "Get your hands up," to her tellers.
All available units raced to the bank with their sirens off.
Hurry up! Hurry up! Put the money in the bag! Hurry up! Hurry up! Get the money in there!
The robber left with a backpack stuffed full of cash. But to keep it, he'd have to evade Martinez police. Officers arrived at the front of the bank. Martinez and Pleasant Hill police departments had only 9 officers available to respond. And 2 of them were tied up on a suspicious call at a supermarket.
I need someone to the rear.
The robber saw an easy escape, the back of the bank, but he needed a diversion. Martinez traffic officer Earl Moffat moved to cover the rear of the bank. In his 10 years on the force, this would be the first time Officer Moffat would fire his weapon.
He's firing rounds at me, and he's only about 20 yards away. So what was going through my mind is just chaos.
As the gun battle continued, Pleasant Hill police were still investigating the 911 call about 2 men with weapons entering the supermarket.
no, I sure haven't.
None of the employees saw anything out of the ordinary.
Have you seen anything like this?
I haven't seen anything like that.
Yes, I'm at the rear.
Okay.
Request mutual aid response from Pleasant Hill ASAP.
Okay, Bob, we gotta go.
All right.
Officer Lauderdale was immediately suspicious.
After we were unable to locate anybody matching that description, I thought the bank robbery in Martinez was too big of a coincidence.
In Martinez, the bank robbery suspect continued his firefight with Officer Moffat.
I couldn't copy. Sam 24 to 97.
His weapon empty, the officer was forced to reload. The gunman used the moment to his advantage. Moffat knew he would be vulnerable to ambush if he climbed over the fence. He followed procedure and called for backup. As officers cordoned off the neighborhood, Martinez police were joined in the investigation by the FBI and Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore. The FBI automatically investigates all bank robberies. Any crime against those institutions is a federal offense.
We have concurrent jurisdiction and traditionally have worked bank robberies very closely with local police. When I first arrived, the scene was quite chaotic. We had been notified that a robbery had occurred and that a gunfight had ensued after the robbery.
Commander Tom Simonetti supervised the crime scene investigation for Martinez police.
At the crime scene, we found shell casings from a Glock 45 pistol, as well as expended rounds that had been fired at our officer.
FBI agents know most bank robberies are poorly planned attempts to get drug money. The evidence this robber left behind suggested a more sophisticated criminal.
The method of operation was so unique. You just don't see robberies committed every day by people dropping through the roof on a rope.
On the rooftop, evidence technicians processed the abandoned power tools. They found no fingerprints. Agents interviewed bank employees about their traumatic experience. They described the robber as a muscular black male in a red jacket. The average bank robbery nets just $3,000. The bank manager determined that the robber escaped with over $35,000. And by getting it from the ATM room, no die packs were placed in with the money. Technicians found no fingerprints, but discovered a shoe print on the desk where the robber landed. While the crime scene was being processed, Martinez police combed the neighborhood behind the bank for the masked suspect. They soon picked up his trail. It was marked by $20 bills that had fallen from his backpack. But the money trail abruptly ended at the closed end of a cul-de-sac, leaving no sign of the suspect. Pleasant Hill police officer Lauderdale was guarding the crime scene when he recognized someone in the crowd of onlookers.
I suddenly noticed that the subject I had seen making the 911 call was now standing in a group of people who were watching the activities at the bank robbery. I thought this was too much of a coincidence, seeing the same subject down at the shopping center and was now at the bank robbery in Martinez. I contacted the subject in order to identify him and find out what he was doing in the area. What are you doing here today?
The officer knew the 911 caller at the supermarket gave dispatchers the name of Kyle Farrell. Now the man said his name was Ural Wills.
Oh, it's around the corner. I just didn't want to interfere. All right.
It was suspicious enough for Officer Lauderdale to request the man to go to the police station for questioning.
The subject was surprisingly cooperative and had no problem with going to talk to Martinez detectives.
The man furnished Martinez police with a driver's license that seemed to confirm his name was Ural Wills. A check of his record revealed that 3 years earlier, in 1990, He was arrested for an armed robbery of a supermarket in Oakland, but was later acquitted. Despite the prior arrest, police had nothing linking the man to the Martinez bank robbery. They had no choice but to release him. They didn't know that uncovering the man's true identity would lead them to the bank robber, who was willing to kill to escape police. In Martinez, California, a bank robber threatened employees' lives until he got what he came for. $35,000 in cash intended for the bank's ATM machines. Police searched for the suspect by following a trail of $20 bills near the crime scene until it ended in a residential cul-de-sac. For FBI Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore, the end of the trail was itself a clue.
We don't have that yet. We're still waiting. The trail of $20 bills stopped there. So initially we assumed that there had been a getaway car somewhere near that end of that cul-de-sac.
Can you recall if anything early today
Martinez police interviewed residents who lived in the ordinarily quiet suburban area. One homeowner said that earlier in the day he was working in his front yard. He noticed a brand new Jeep Cherokee speed past his home. He thought the white female behind the wheel might have been just a reckless teenager. The witness said the vehicle had no license plates, only a placard from a nearby Jeep dealership. Several other witnesses in the neighborhood also saw the vehicle, but none of them could agree on the Jeep's color.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you. I may call on you again.
Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore pursued the vehicle lead.
Yes, Bob Moore with the FBI. How you doing?
He called the dealership advertised on the SUV and learned they sold over 60 new Jeep Cherokees in the past 3 months.
We began identifying the people who had purchased those cars with negative results.
Each Jeep Cherokee had to be investigated. Martinez Police Commander Tom Simonetti knew it would be painstaking work.
We also talked to several of the registered owners of new Jeeps, and they had either no criminal record or they had been out of town and were able to prove that they weren't involved in the robbery. We found that one had been stolen from a nearby BART station. The vehicle was recovered in the city of Concord, and after investigating it and processing it, it was determined that it was not involved in the crime. The last 2 Jeeps that we looked at were both sold to a rental car company in the city of Antioch.
This is what we have here. Anything else?
Agents went to the rental company to investigate the last 2 vehicles.
You can give me the rental paperwork on this last week. I need to know.
They requested copies of the rental contracts. They learned one of the Jeeps was rented the day before the robbery and returned the following evening. The name on the contract was one Ural Wills, the name used by the motorcyclist in the Martinez Bank parking lot, who was also the same man police observed making a 911 call near a Pleasant Hill supermarket. Martinez police needed to clear up the question of how Ural Wills could have simultaneously fled from the area in a Jeep and been spotted in the bank's parking lot as an onlooker. For answers, they turned to Officer Lauderdale.
Take a quick look at these. When I presented the picture of Ural Wills and in the photo lineup to Officer Lauderdale, he identified a different person as Ural Wills.
Lauderdale picked the photo of Doug Jones, a known criminal associate of Ural Wills.
In looking into Mr. Wills's criminal history, we determined that he had an accomplice who had committed several crimes with him.
Detectives believed that the accomplice, Doug Jones, posed as Wills at the scene of the robbery to throw off police.
The information we got actually came back to this guy.
They now considered Wills their prime suspect. To agents, it was clear why Jones made the call while the bank robbery was in progress.
Yeah, that's who I contacted.
The planning of this included the attempt to create a diversion of the police by making a 911 call to the Pleasant Hill Police Department.
Martinez police ran a more detailed background check on Ural Wills. They spoke to the Oakland detectives that arrested him 3 years ago for a supermarket robbery. They expressed their frustration that he was later acquitted. Martinez commander Tom Simonetti learned of yet another recent arrest of Ural Wills.
During this investigation, we had found that Mr. Wills had been arrested by the California Highway Patrol for carrying a loaded Glock pistol.
Martinez police discovered that the bank robber also used a Glock pistol. Ballistics tests on the recovered bullets revealed that they were from a Glock 9mm. Martinez investigators also learned from Oakland criminal informants that Wills often preyed on other criminals.
He had made several armed robberies of known drug dealers in the city of Oakland, which led us to believe we were dealing with somebody who either wasn't afraid or was very brazen in his criminal activity.
The same criminal informants gave police insight to Ural Wills' methods of operation. They said he often used female getaway drivers because Wills believed they were less suspicious to police. The fact that a woman was seen behind the wheel of the Jeep was consistent with Wills' criminal history. From the auto rental contracts, agents were able to trace Ural Wills' financial records.
The Jeep Cherokee had been paid for with a credit card by Wills. We determined through subpoenas that the credit card had been issued by a credit union in Berkeley.
From Berkeley Police. I'd like to know if Mr. Ural Wills...
They also learned Wills had a savings account at the credit union, but found no unusually large deposits that could be linked to the Martinez bank robbery.
We asked the employees at the credit union if he were to appear at the credit union to call the Berkeley Police Department.
Thank you very much.
Even without any suspicious bank deposits, agents and Martinez police commander Tom Simonetti still believed evidence implicated Wills in the bank robbery. Wills had an apartment in Antioch, California, 20 miles east of Martinez.
Based on the information compiled by the Martinez Police Department, the FBI, and the Antioch Police Department, we were able to obtain a federal search warrant of Mr. Wills' apartment in the city of Antioch.
30 days after the bank robbery, FBI agents and a police SWAT team prepared to execute the search warrant on Wills' apartment. They knew he had already fired 10 rounds at a Martinez police officer. The SWAT team suspected Wills would shoot again. FBI agents and a Martinez police SWAT team were serving a search warrant on an apartment belonging to bank robbery suspect Ural Wills. They found one man in the apartment. The SWAT team quickly determined he was not Wills. They identified him as Doug Jones, who was a known criminal accomplice of Ural Wills, as well as Wills' roommate. Jones was the man seen making the 911 call near a supermarket before the Martinez bank robbery, and the man spotted in the bank parking lot after the robbery. Officers removed Jones from the apartment and took him to the station for questioning. As investigators executed their search warrant, they found several items of interest, including a bulletproof vest. Agents also found a red jacket that matched witness descriptions of the bank robber's clothing. In the bedroom, they identified a pair of sneakers as the type worn by the robber. They found an even more telling clue inside one of the shoes. $3,000, all in $20 bills. The stolen money from the Martinez bank was also entirely in $20 bills. The shoes were sent to the lab where the soles could be compared to a shoe print recovered from the Martinez bank robbery. Detectives also uncovered hospital bills that suggested Wills was injured on the day of the bank robbery. Martinez Police Commander Tom Simonetti followed up.
Upon contacting the doctor at the hospital, he told us that Mr. Wills had told him that he slipped on a wet floor at a grocery store and broke his foot. The doctor, however, pointed out that the injury was more consistent with a hard impact, in particular a straight down impact from falling or dropping off something.
Wills was further tied to the crime when analysts confirmed one of the shoes found in his apartment matched the shoe print taken at the scene of the Martinez robbery. At the police station,
Where is Mr. Wills?
agents questioned Wills' roommate and criminal associate, Doug Jones. As suspicious as Jones' actions were, police couldn't charge him with a crime or make him talk. If Jones knew where Wills was hiding, he wasn't telling investigators.
The biggest frustration in this case was trying to locate Mr. Wills after he knew we were looking for him.
222, go ahead.
We had searched his residence, we had contacted everybody that knew him, and there was no doubt he knew we were after him.
Agents knew Wills was a career criminal and were certain he would strike again. They spent nearly a month searching Bay Area neighborhoods Wills was known to frequent. They found no sign of the violent fugitive. While investigators hunted for Wills, he was planning a crime even more ambitious than his Martinez bank robbery. He gathered a group of accomplices and filled them in on his plan. Four days before Christmas in 1993, Wills' accomplices descended upon the Antioch, California home of jewelry store owner Gene Mayer and his wife Ruth. They posed as detectives investigating credit card fraud. Once the door was opened, they revealed their sinister purpose.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! You're too low, man! Get on the ground now! Get down there! Get down! Just stay quiet. You won't get hurt. Shut up! Shut up! Now!
Two bound the couple with duct tape, while a third moved toward the back of the house to look for a safe.
You guys stay quiet. Don't move. You won't get hurt. You got the safe? Good. Let's go. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up there.
The men told Gene Mayer they were kidnapping his wife. They said they'd phone with the details on how he could retrieve her. Mayer could do nothing, as Ural Wills' accomplices left with his wife and a safe full of jewelry. They used Mrs. Mayer's Suburban as their getaway vehicle.
Get in there. Let's go.
Just 10 minutes later, Gene Mayer freed himself and called 911. Antioch police responded. The scene was supervised by Sergeant Scott Williford.
When I arrived at the Mayer residence, officers were in the process of cordoning off the crime scene with police tape and barriers. I went inside the residence, and Gene Mayer was in the process of being interviewed. He was very traumatized.
You've got to do it. Get after it.
Detectives tried to focus Mr. Mayer on describing his wife's abductors,
I need this.
but he got only brief glances at them.
All right, okay. What did they take? Well, they took the
As
safe.
detectives processed the house for evidence, they discovered a ransom note.
One was white, one was...
Mayer never saw the kidnappers leave it. The note warned him not to contact the authorities. Gene Mayer worried that he might have made a mistake by calling police. He feared the kidnappers would retaliate by killing his wife. To help find Mrs. Mayer, Antioch police requested assistance from the FBI. They searched for any sign of Ruth Mayer's Suburban that her abductors used as a getaway vehicle. Investigators knew the chances of finding a kidnapping victim alive diminish the longer the victim is held captive. Officers in Antioch and neighboring communities urgently scoured parking lots at shopping centers, thinking the kidnappers might have abandoned Mrs. Mayer's SUV and switched to another vehicle.
Yeah, we'll go back.
They found nothing.
Still on the airport road, looking for something.
You've got to do it. Get after it. I mean,
Detectives learned that the jewelry in the stolen safe was worth $400,000. But Mr. Mayer wasn't concerned about the jewelry. He wanted his wife returned unharmed. Blindfolded during her abduction, Ruth Mayer had no idea where she was or what the kidnappers had in store for her. Bank robbery suspect Ural Wills used a team of accomplices to rob a jewelry store owner and kidnap his wife. Inside the Mayer home, Antioch police analyzed the ransom note left behind by the suspects. The kidnappers demanded $2 million for the safe return of Mrs. Mayer. Police anticipated they would phone with instructions. Technicians installed phone traps to trace and record any incoming calls. But none came. For more leads, Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford gathered details about the jewelry stolen from the house.
I want you guys to do your job.
If any of it turned up, it might put them on the trail of the kidnappers.
Since Mr. Mayer was a jeweler, he had specific detailed information on the description of all the jewelry. We were able to provide or compile a detailed list and put it out to other agencies regarding the stolen property.
The FBI brought additional resources and helped coordinate the search for any sign of Mrs. Mayer or the Suburban her abductors stole from her driveway. By the following morning, investigators were still combing the Mayer's neighborhood for clues.
Teams of officers and agents began talking to people in the neighborhood. We were knocking on doors asking if people had seen anything suspicious in the area.
In addition to interviewing neighbors, investigators like Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford turned to the media for help.
We did everything possibly that we could to get the information out to the public so we could have the public's assistance in trying to locate Ruth Mayer.
Hundreds of volunteers distributed over 8,000 leaflets throughout the Bay Area. The leaflets had photos of Mrs. Mayer and a description of her Suburban. The strategy quickly brought results.
Within hours after the kidnapping, with the information put out to the other agencies, we located the Suburban that was stolen.
Technicians processed the vehicle for evidence. They found nothing useful. Investigators theorized that the kidnappers transferred Ruth Mayer to a second getaway vehicle. They took impressions of fresh tire tracks found at the scene. The impressions could be compared to the suspect's vehicle if it was found. Although they had found her vehicle, detectives still had no clue where Mrs. Mayer was being held. The kidnappers left her unattended for hours at a time. She used the opportunity to bite through her restraints. Mayer knew an escape attempt was too risky. Instead, she memorized the details of the garage in case she was ever asked to identify it. In the driveway, she saw the outline of a car. It was covered with a blue tarp. Mayer thought about shouting for help, but she was concerned what might happen if her abductors heard her. For the time being, she had no choice but to wait. Mr. Mayer quickly raised the money he hoped would bring his wife home. Wearing latex gloves, agents recorded the bill's serial numbers. They were prepared to make the drop as soon as they received instructions from the kidnappers. Two days after the kidnapping, police responded to a call from a Berkeley credit union. The FBI had asked the manager to call police if he saw the suspect from the Martinez bank robbery. He spotted Ural Wills trying to make a deposit.
Looks like it's all here. Bring up your account number.
The teller tried to access the account, but it was frozen.
Sometimes that works.
Berkeley police arrived and calmly approached the bank, but Wills spotted them. As they frisked Wills, Berkeley police retrieved a loaded clip for a 9mm Glock pistol. They also found Wills had something else to hide.
Located in his pocket was a key to a car. The police officers asked him where his car was parked. He denied owning a car. The officers then walked down the street checking vehicles until they located his vehicle.
The keys in Wills' pocket fit a Ford Explorer. FBI Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore searched the impounded vehicle for evidence that would link Wills to the Martinez bank robbery. Instead, he uncovered the first break in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping case.
The key items of evidence found in the Ford Explorer the day of Wills' arrest were a cell phone, a weapon, a pager that belonged to Ural Wills, and a bag containing jewelry.
Agents had previously thought the Ruth Mayer kidnapping and Martinez bank robbery cases were unrelated. All that changed when they discovered some of the jewelry was personalized. RM were the initials of Ruth Mayer. Agents showed the jewelry to Ruth Mayer's husband, who confirmed it was stolen from their home. Investigators now considered Wills a suspect both in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping and the Martinez bank robbery. To further tie Wills to the Martinez bank robbery, FBI technicians performed ballistics tests on the Glock handgun recovered from Wills' vehicle. They compared the bullets test-fired by the Glock in the lab to bullets recovered from the Martinez Bank crime scene. The tests indicated the bullets were not fired by the same gun. Investigators believed Wills probably disposed of the pistol used during the bank robbery and replaced it with another gun of the same make and model.
All right, we found the jewels in your car. I want to know where you were and what you were doing.
Wills was no longer just a bank robbery suspect. He was also a suspect in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping.
We can already connect you to Mrs. Mayer. What these jewels are doing in...
Desperate to save Mrs. Mayer's life, Antioch police asked Wills to tell them where she was being held. But Wills refused to cooperate. He remained silent on his involvement in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping. With Wills in jail, investigators were concerned his accomplices would panic and do something desperate.
This kidnapping certainly exhibits some organization to it. But
authorities held a press conference to appeal for new leads. They also warned Wills' accomplices that they were closing in and that Mrs. Mayer should be released unharmed.
On the other hand, I can't say for certain, but certainly we're looking at them.
I've been here, that's what I'm telling you. Nobody's telling me nothing.
On the fourth day of Mrs. Mayer's captivity, Christmas Eve, the man guarding Mrs. Mayer received instructions from the other accomplices in the kidnapping plot. His orders were to get rid of Mrs. Mayer any way he could. The man ordered her to stay down and out of sight while he drove. Mrs. Mayer couldn't be sure whether she was going to live or die.
That's it?
Kidnapping victim Ruth Mayer had endured 4 days of captivity. The ringleader of the abduction, Ural Wills, was in police custody on bank robbery charges. That left Wills' accomplices leaderless, and they were worried that the law was closing in. The accomplices ordered the man guarding Ruth Mayer to get rid of her any way he could. "30 miles north of her Antioch, California home where she was abducted, in a town called El Sobrante, the kidnappers decided to get rid of Mrs. Mayer by releasing her.
Now don't take off your blindfold.
Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford believed police efforts to reach the kidnappers through the media paid off.
Well, they knew the seriousness of the crime. They knew the pressure was on. This was a national publicized case at the time, and they didn't know what to do. It was so high profile, everybody knew all the details of this, and they were forced to release her.
News of Ruth Mayer's return made headlines and the local newscasts.
I just want to say that I'm so very happy to be home.
Anything that you can...
Investigators questioned Mrs. Mayer about her ordeal. She didn't know the location in which she was held and could not describe her abductors. Even so, she provided agents with important detail.
She was able to use her senses as she was held in this garage and actually had remarkable recall as to a lot of the circumstances that were occurring in the area where she was held. She described certain sounds that she heard while she was held. She described the sound of trains going by. She described the sounds of buses or diesel-powered vehicles having to gear down or slow down as if to take a sharp turn.
We've gotten a fair amount.
Based on information obtained from Mrs. Mayer, investigators were looking for a location near train tracks and major bus lines. They used the cell phone seized in Will's vehicle to narrow the search. Agents quickly obtained the phone's billing records.
And they just make their way heading east.
They concentrated on calls Wills made around the time of Mrs. Mayer's kidnapping.
We were able to track the cell phone usage and determine where it had been in use the prior night, including in Antioch, and as well as the numbers that it had called that night.
Investigators learned towers in West Contra Costa County picked up Will's cell phone signal on the evening of the kidnapping. They began looking for streets in Contra Costa County where train tracks and major bus lines intersected. Based on Mrs. Mayer's observations, agents were looking for any home that had a vehicle covered with a blue tarp in the driveway.
We located the house in San Pablo, and just from the visual inspection outside, it matched the criteria and the description that Ruth Mayer gave us.
Agents obtained a search warrant for the home and found no one inside. Mrs. Mayer identified the garage as the place in which she was held. Agents wanted to question the home's owner, but they were unable to locate him. Investigators sought out homeowner's relatives in an effort to find him. Edward Rodriguez was the homeowner's nephew. Agents were unaware that he guarded Ruth Mayer during the kidnapping. But Rodriguez mistakenly believed the agents were looking for him and said he was just about to turn himself in.
Against you in a court of law.
Investigators found Rodriguez remorseful about the part he played in the kidnapping and convinced him to cooperate.
How about picking out some for me?
Ultimately, the guard confessed to the whole crime, confessed to the planning, the details of the operation, and laid out the whole crime from A to Z.
Rodriguez named all the conspirators in the scheme.
Anybody else here on this page?
He said Ural Wills planned and led the kidnapping operation. Agents corroborated the guard's statements with Will's cell phone records. They later apprehended all the conspirators. Brian Tomasello, one of the gunmen that burst into the mayor's home, was found guilty on 6 counts of robbery and kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison. Edward Rodriguez was found guilty of kidnapping and robbery. The jury gave him a short 8-year sentence because he released Mrs. Mayer. Before he could be tried for the Ruth Mayer kidnapping, Ural Wills was found guilty of the Martinez bank robbery and was sentenced to 39 years. Prosecutors learned that Wills was suffering from kidney failure. Doctors gave him less than 10 years to live.
Ural Wills is already going to be...
Wills was certain to die in prison.
He's having serious kidney.
Prosecutors informed Mrs. Mayer of their plans not to try him for her kidnapping.
She's a forgiving person. She knew justice was served. She knew he was in custody, Mr. Wills, for the rest of his life. And I believe that she forgave everybody.
As he pursued his violent schemes, Ural Wills had expected to make millions and live a life of luxury. Instead, the FBI and local police made sure the criminal's last days were spent behind bars. Decades before 9/11, the United States is attacked by terrorists. American businesses are bombed. Innocent people are slaughtered. Symbols of liberty become targets for destruction. The terrorists are mobile, well-organized, and deadly. As the violence escalates, their victims have but one hope: the FBI.
In the 1970s, cities across the United States became a battleground for vicious Croatian radicals. Their violent agenda targeted their own people living in America. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents all over the country work to unravel a complex web of extortions, bombings, and assassinations. At stake were the lives of innocent Croatian families trying to build a new life in America.
New York City, 1977. On the morning of June 14th, 3 men approached the Yugoslav diplomatic mission to the United Nations. Outside the mission, a New York City police officer stands guard. Inside, Yugoslav security agents protect the embassy. One of them asks the visitors for identification.
Upstairs, go!
Hearing the shot, police officers rush into the building. Foreign missions are technically outside the NYPD's jurisdiction. The officers are now in Yugoslav territory. As backup arrives, the officers inside the mission try to negotiate with the 3 men, but they have barricaded themselves in an upper office. The intruders warn they have taken a woman hostage. They will kill her if anyone tries to enter. One officer offers himself as a substitute hostage.
Take me for the hostage.
The gunmen refuse. Agents from the FBI's New York field office respond to the scene. According to federal law, the FBI is responsible for investigating all attacks on foreign missions. Special Agent Len Cross.
As I arrived, we had police officers in the park. We had police officers on surrounding buildings with scoped rifles. And then we had the emergency service units making entry into the building. What was going through my mind was, what was happening on the inside.
The suspects appear in an upstairs window, brandishing a Croatian flag. They toss propaganda leaflets into the street. The leaflets call on the United Nations to force communist Yugoslavia to grant Croatia its independence.
What they were trying to do was gain publicity for their cause and showing the oppressive regime that existed in Yugoslavia and how they were oppressing the Croatian people.
A hostage negotiator talks to the suspects for nearly 2 hours. They finally agree to come out, but only if they are taken into custody by U.S. authorities, not Yugoslav officials.
They were just trying to protect themselves from the officials because they knew if they got their hands on them, they'd kill them.
Easy.
And then finally, when they realized it was the New York City police and the FBI on the other side of the door and assured them that no harm would come to them, they surrendered without incident.
Move! Stay right there.
The suspects reveal that they never had a hostage. They were only bluffing to prevent Yugoslav security agents from mounting an armed assault. As the police officers escort the suspects out of the building, mission security confronts them.
Step aside, gentlemen. No, the prisoners.
They tell the officers to hand over the radicals.
This is Yugoslavian mission. You have no right here. This is territory of Yugoslavia.
Put the guns down.
The NYPD officers refuse.
Step aside.
No.
Lower your
They
weapon.
intend to leave the mission with the prisoners.
We're taking our prisoners out. Lower the guns.
The security agents finally back down. The invasion of a foreign mission on U.S. soil is unprecedented. One of their employees has been seriously wounded. Special Agent Cross now leads the investigation. He searches for a possible motive for the attack. He starts by analyzing the long history of hatred and violence between Yugoslav Serbs and Croatians as they fought over the same Eastern European lands.
The reasons and motives stretched centuries, where Serbians would go into Croatian villages and kill every man, woman, and child, and the Croatians would reciprocate.
1971. The violence spread outside Yugoslavia. Croatian radicals assassinated the Yugoslav ambassador to Sweden. In 1972, they hijacked a Swedish airliner and forced the government to release 7 political prisoners from jail. Later that same year, Croatian terrorists claimed responsibility for planting a bomb on board a Yugoslav airliner. The blast killed 26 innocent people.
I mean, the hatred was so deep and it was hard to fathom. We were dealing also with trying to understand cultural and historical issues. And it was not your simple criminal matter. It was a lot of payback on both sides.
Now, that payback is spread from Europe to the United States. It's a terrifying trend. Cross contacts fellow FBI agents at U.S. embassies around the world. They confirm that there has been a disturbing increase in Croatian attacks on Yugoslav embassies and diplomats worldwide. Special Agent Cross works closely with police and prosecutors, providing background information on the men who attacked the Yugoslav mission. 4 months later, on October 13th, a New York jury finds all 3 men guilty of conspiring to take hostage Yugoslavia's ambassador to the United Nations. The jury also convicts the gunman who wounded the Yugoslav security agent of assault with a deadly weapon. For Agent Cross, the case is officially closed. But everything he has learned tells him that Croatian terrorism in the United States is on the rise and about to explode. 9 months later, in Chicago, Cross's fears become a grim reality. Croatian businessmen begin calling the FBI in a panic. They have each received an anonymous letter written in Serbo-Croatian. The letters demand a large sum of money and threatens horrific consequences if the recipient fails to pay up. Special Agent Bjarne Borison of the FBI's Chicago field office examines the letters.
Yesterday.
Borison speaks fluent Serbo-Croatian and has a background in counterintelligence.
They said, "You are not doing your part in our cause to overthrow the communist government. We've assessed your situation and decided that you are capable of paying this amount of money." And they would instruct them to send this money to an address in Paraguay, and if you fail to do that, you'll pay the consequences. It's absolute extortion. That's the way the FBI looked at it, was, yeah, this was an extortion attempt, and they were threatening your well-being if you didn't cooperate.
Agents are unsure whether the culprits are Serb spies or Croatian criminals. But they do know the extortionists have cast a wide net. Nationwide, the FBI collects a total of 52 extortion letters from Croatian businessmen. The letters are nearly identical, but with one key exception. The senders demand a different amount of money from each victim.
Most of the people who received those extortion letters were well off, or at least comfortable individuals, and had the ability to pay that money that was requested.
In New York City, Special Agent Len Cross heads the investigation into the extortion letters. Searching for leads, he contacts Pero Vučas, a prominent Croatian political writer living in Queens.
He was known to be against violence, and we felt that he might be an individual who could perhaps assist us in terms of identifying who may be responsible for these letters.
Agent Cross asks Vučas if he thinks the extortionists could be fellow Croatians.
He did not feel any good Croatian would have written these letters and made the demands that were made in these letters.
Instead, Vučas blames the Serb government of Yugoslavia.
He told me that it was his belief that these letters were generated by the Yugoslavian intelligence service to try to disrupt the Croatian community.
The majority were peaceful, and they wanted to overthrow the Yugoslav government, but by peaceful means. But there was always those who wanted to use more violent means and would do anything to achieve that goal.
Vučić believes the letters are an attempt by Serbian spies to sabotage Croatian demands for freedom.
I left him my card, told him if he could think of anything else, please just to give me a call, and we would appreciate it.
In Chicago, Agent Borison focuses on the letter's demand to send money to a post office box in the South American country of Paraguay.
The address in Paraguay was of key significance to us because somebody had to collect that money, so you had to zero in on who that might be.
The FBI sends an agent from the U.S. Embassy in Argentina to Paraguay to investigate. The agent observes a man receiving the money. He is later identified as a known Croatian terrorist who in 1972 had shot the Yugoslav ambassador to Sweden. A month later, in New York City, the case takes a dramatic turn. A man calls local news stations claiming 2 bombs had been planted in New York City. One at the United Nations, the other at Grand Central Station. In 1978, the FBI investigates a group of Croatian terrorists who use extortion to fund their cause. In New York, 2 local television stations receive a call from a man who claims 2 bombs have been planted in New York City. One is at the United Nations. Outside a library at the UN compound, a police officer finds a suspicious-looking bag. The officer immediately calls in the NYPD bomb squad. Investigators find a note nearby written in Serbo-Croatian. It demands Croatian independence and says, quote, "This is the beginning. Our decision is kamikaze." Bomb technicians carefully dismantle the device. It's armed with dynamite and a blasting cap. The timer is set to explode within the hour.
It was designed to go off, it's just that it malfunctioned.
At Grand Central Station, police find the second bomb stashed inside a locker. Again, the device is accompanied by a letter demanding Croatian independence. If either of the devices had detonated, the loss of life and property would have been disastrous.
The writing was on the wall. Things are becoming more and more violent, and they were happening more frequently.
The FBI believes it's only a matter of time before someone is killed.
Gentlemen, go ahead, have a seat, get comfortable. So, with the contact...
Agents from the New York field office combined forces.
We felt that it would be a good idea to bring all the case agents together on one squad under one supervisor where we could exchange and coordinate our activities.
Special Agent Cross also proposes the coordination of a nationwide effort.
If we did not, my prediction was that all hell was going to break loose.
2 weeks later, in a wealthy suburb of New York, a successful businessman is gunned down outside his own home. His only crime: he's a Croatian immigrant who refused to submit to extortion. The FBI's worst fears have been realized. An extortion target has been murdered, and agents have no viable leads. In Chicago, Special Agent Bjorn Borison becomes concerned that Croatian Americans in his area will also be targeted.
It wasn't an empty threat they made in that extortion letter. They meant it. And we didn't know who they'd come after, so we had to contact all those individuals who'd received those letters to warn them and advise them they could be a possible target. And at the same time, try to identify who's responsible.
The FBI also alerts other law enforcement agencies to watch for anyone purchasing illegal weapons or bomb-making materials. A few days later, the Chicago field office receives a call from the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. A known Croatian radical is trying to buy dynamite.
And they had just got an individual in a sting operation
who had purchased 2 cases of dynamite from them. This individual met with the ATF undercover agents thinking he was buying real dynamite, but they actually sold him dummy dynamite.
The buyer's name is Ivo Afinic. He is a high-ranking member of a Croatian independence group called Otpor.
Obviously, they have plans to do a lot more bombings, and that's why they were buying this. The name of the organization is Hrvatski Narodni Otpor, which means Croatian National Resistance, so the word Otpor means resistance.
While the majority of Otpor members are law-abiding citizens, the FBI suspects that there may be a criminal faction operating within the organization intent on extorting and murdering fellow Croatians.
All right, guys, we're gonna pop this door. We're gonna go in. We got some.
Otpor meets at a Croatian social club on the south side of Chicago. In a joint operation, FBI and ATF agents raid the club, searching for bomb-making materials. Investigators find the 2 cases of fake dynamite, but there are no live explosives anywhere in the club. A thorough search fails to turn up enough evidence to press charges against Ivo Afinic. That same day, in a nearby Chicago neighborhood, Daniel Nikolic opens up his shop. Nikolic is one of dozens of Croatian-American businessmen who have received an extortion letter. The cabinet maker refused to be bullied. Chicago police, the Chicago Fire Department, ATF agents, and the FBI investigate.
We did a search of the premises, and we determined that a bomb had been detonated on the roof of the cabinet shop.
Special Agent Borison interviews Daniel Nikolic.
There was no doubt who he thought was responsible, and that was the Otpor leadership, as a result of his failure to pay the extortion letter that he received.
With Nikolic's help, the FBI talks to members of the Croatian community. Their top priority is to find a confidential informant inside Otpor, familiar with the organization's violent activities.
Leaders in the Croatian Cultural Center.
The key to almost any investigation is you have to develop someone inside the organization who's willing to cooperate with you.
But the Chicago FBI has trouble finding anyone who will talk about Otpor.
About the Serbian activity.
To get someone that was actually inside the group is very hard, because it wasn't that big a group who was actually responsible for the violence. It was a small group, and it's very difficult to find someone inside that small group who's going to cooperate with you.
While agents try to recruit an informant in Chicago, Pasadena, California becomes the group's next target. On the morning of November 22nd, a Croatian businessman steps outside his home and into the gun sights of an assassin. The victim had received an extortion letter 5 months earlier, but he refused to support the Otpor cause. Local police and the FBI investigate, but they find little evidence. In San Francisco, home to a large Croatian-American population, agents mount an all-out effort to penetrate Otpor before they kill again. The FBI assigns Special Agent Bob Gorth, who speaks fluent Serbo-Croatian, to the full-time task of recruiting a confidential informant.
The FBI was having a problem with penetrating the Croatian community for the same reason that you have trouble in any ethnic terrorist field. The criminal act is a result of their nationalism. Whether or not they're involved, they will stand together as a community against law enforcement.
With a background in Yugoslavian counterintelligence, Special Agent Gorth understands the bitter conflict between the Croatians and the Serbs.
Not as often as I... Yugoslavia was an artificial country. It was born after World War I. The Croatians fundamentally were constantly fighting to get out from under what they considered Serb domination.
His understanding of the culture helps him enter San Francisco's Croatian community.
I was very un-bureau in a way. No suit and tie, no anything. A lot of times conversations were over a beer, over a bar table. We had to find a way to break down the wall and to convince someone on the inside who had information that what they were doing was morally wrong. It had to be a matter of conscience and a matter of actual conversion of thought.
From San Francisco to Chicago to New York, FBI agents compare notes, trying to find an insider who can give them any information on the mysterious, tight-knit terror group. The FBI's lead case agent in New York is Len Cross.
It was about 6 o'clock at night, and we were going over our leads and trying to get an idea, what do we need to do next? And I received a phone call.
Agent Cross, it's for you. He wouldn't say. It sounded urgent.
After 4 months of silence, Pero Vučas, the Croatian activist writer, is desperate to talk to Cross.
You got a what?
And he says, I need to talk to you, and I need to talk to you now. I got a threatening letter, and he says, I'm going to tell you everything. I know who's all responsible.
The call may be the break the FBI needs.
So I says, okay, I'm coming right over. I says, I'll meet you right at your house.
As soon as I can.
All right, this evening, thank you.
Okay, all right. Got a threatening letter?
Other agents from the New York field office accompany Cross to the meeting.
They says, no, you're not going, we're going to go with you, because I mean, this could be a setup. They could be trying to get you.
Nationwide, FBI agents try to infiltrate a deadly terrorist organization that extorts and murders their fellow Croatian immigrants. Pero Vučas, a Croatian political writer, asks Special Agent Len Cross to come to his house. He's finally willing to talk.
He was very concerned, very scared, and he proceeded to show me this letter. It was essentially telling him that if he didn't shut up and didn't get his act together, that something very bad was going to happen to him. He realized at this point that these guys meant business and that he was in their crosshairs, and that his only alternative was to reach out to the FBI, put his trust in them, that they can get the job done.
The writer tells Agent Cross that he believes members of Otpor are behind the letters and the violence.
And he says they're criminals, they're just a bunch of criminals that have infiltrated the Croatian organizations. At that point, he laid it out who all the king players were throughout the country. He couldn't tell us who wrote their letters, but what he did tell us is these are the guys that are running the whole operation.
According to Vučas, Otpor's North American headquarters is in Chicago. Some of the key terrorists live in the Midwestern United States.
It was really good information and definitely kind of was starting to fill in the puzzle.
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, agents contact a Croatian priest who the FBI learns is influential throughout the Midwestern Croatian community.
Sit down.
Father Bradish is an outspoken opponent of violence. Agents believe he may provide valuable leads. An FBI agent from the Milwaukee field office interviews him at the Catholic elementary school where he works. As they talk, Father Bradish opens his mail. One package contains a book. The agent spots a wire.
He observed batteries, wires, and explosives. The agent, being concerned for the location, that it was in an elementary school with young kids, grabbed the book and he ran outside.
The Milwaukee police sends a bomb technician to disable the device. Tragically, the blasting cap explodes, taking off part of the technician's hand. The FBI issues a warning to the 52 extortion victims that they've identified across the country. Beware of book-sized packages wrapped in brown paper. The next day, in Queens, New York, Pero Vučas picks up his mail. Inside his post office box, he finds a note telling him that he has a package. The postal worker can't find it.
No, please, would you look one more time? It has to be here.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
The package has been stored on a shelf near the counter.
Which package right there?
It looks like a book.
I don't want it. I'll come back for it later.
Vučas contacts Special Agent Len Cross.
I received a call telling me I've got a bomb. It's at the post office. He says, you want me to go get it? I says, no, leave it there. I says, we're going to get the bomb squad. We'll take it from there.
At the FBI lab, a bomb expert studies the package. It is nearly identical to a device sent to Milwaukee.
This book bomb was very similar in construction. The cutout looked the same. The firing system was the same. It was the same type of dynamite, same type of blasting cap.
The postmarks on the packaging reveal that both bombs were mailed from Akron, Ohio, on the same day. Agents alert Ohio authorities of the likelihood that the bomb maker lives in their area. In Cleveland, police search the home of Pavel Chotoras. The Croatian radical is their chief suspect in the bombing of a Croatian bookstore 5 days earlier.
Spread it out a little bit.
Special Agent Bjarne Borison.
During the search, they found a book that was hollowed out and was obviously a book bomb.
The bomb is a prototype. Once again, there are no live explosives on the premises. Without further evidence, no arrest can be made. Investigators try to link the prototype to the book bombs mailed to Milwaukee and Queens.
Every bomb maker has his own unique style. And of course, one of the reasons for doing that is safety. You want to do it the same way every time, because if you've changed anything, it's very dangerous to wire a book bomb.
In the lab, Special Agent Denny Klein compares all three devices. Each book is hollowed out to the same depth. The glue and solder used to construct the devices each have the same chemical composition. Even minute tool marks on the bomb's wiring match.
The belief of the laboratory was that this was a prototype that was used to make the two earlier bombs.
There is no way to know how many more bombs have been constructed from the prototype. March 17th, 1980. New Yorkers and tourists pack Fifth Avenue to watch the city's annual St. Patrick's Day parade. 10:55 a.m. A bomb explodes at the 30th floor office of a Yugoslav bank. FBI agents respond, including Special Agent Ken Maxwell.
We were doing interviews of the employees of the bank, the employees of the neighboring offices, the maintenance people in the building, delivery people, anybody who would even come remotely close to 500 Fifth Avenue that day.
The only significant evidence agents find is another note in which Otpor claims responsibility. The terrorists issue a chilling threat. The bomb attacks will continue until Croatia is free. On June 3rd, 1980, the terrorists target one of America's most cherished symbols of freedom, the Statue of Liberty. On June 3rd, 1980, Croatian terrorists target one of America's most cherished symbols of freedom, the Statue of Liberty. Special Agent Ken Maxwell helps investigate the bombing.
Someone had gotten into what they call the museum story room at the base of the statue that tells you the whole history of how the statue was built and all of the wonderful history in the pictures, and plus the souvenir shop. All of that had been blown to smithereens. A considerable amount of damage had been done throughout the base of the statue.
A number of violent groups claim responsibility for the bombing, including the Palestinian Liberation Organization, anti-Castro Cubans, and even neo-Nazis.
Multiple claims of credit back in the early 80s was not an unusual phenomenon.
Investigators painstakingly search for pieces of the bomb, expecting that the evidence will help them determine which group is responsible.
Hey guys, looks like I got a wire over here.
We spent all night there sifting through all of the rubble and debris and came up with quite a few components. The components of the improvised explosive device were strikingly similar to previous Croatian-related bombings.
What began as an attempt to extort dozens of Croatian Americans has escalated into a campaign of violence.
The Statue of Liberty was the greatest symbol of attraction for potential terrorists because of what it stood for. In their mind, the United States was not listening to their cause. So let's bring the cause to their attention and let's show them, the United States, that this is a real issue to us, and almost trying to extort the United States of America to help them achieve independence.
But the terrorists' logic is flawed. The attack only fuels authorities to intensify their investigation.
Nice. Bombing our Statue of Liberty, it's a slap in the face. So what we did, we started to focus our resources, our investigative attention on several individuals who we strongly suspected were involved in this kind of activity.
In New York, the FBI sets up intensive surveillance on several key terror suspects. In San Francisco, FBI Special Agent Bob Gorth continues his efforts to recruit an informant inside the terrorist ring.
I spent over a year doing nothing but contacting Croatians. It's very important to understand the people, to speak their language, to understand where they come from, even to a degree to empathize with them, so that you can talk to them in terms that they understand and appreciate. I interviewed over 300, I think, of all stripes and persuasions and types, trying to find the right source. I finally found a man who indicated he'd like to talk again. Hadn't told me anything, but he'd like to talk again. After talking to him, I don't know how many times, we began to build a rapport. And finally he said, I think I'll help.
Finding a source of information inside Otpor is a major break for the FBI. After thoroughly debriefing the informant in San Francisco, the FBI sends him to New York to gather intelligence on the most recent Croatian bombings.
He originally had lived in New York, and he was well acquainted with the people.
The informant renews old friendships with Croatian radicals.
He would have been killed if members of Otpor Command had found out that he was the man.
Despite the risk, he probes for details about their plans.
If you could obtain inside information on what's going on in a criminal enterprise, it means a tremendous amount in terms of achieving success in an investigation.
The informant learns that the group intends to assassinate an outspoken critic of Otpor.
Take care of him.
The target is Pero Vučas, the prominent Croatian political writer.
They were going to kill him with a rifle as he was walking his daughter, his 6-year-old daughter, to school in the morning. If they missed, they could hit his 6-year-old daughter. They had no concern for her, and most of the agents and the detectives working this case, they all had kids. So, you know, they're thinking in terms of a father. How could they do such a thing like this?
According to the informant, the ruthless plot is already in motion. Special Agent Ken Maxwell watches as 2 suspected terrorists park a van near the target's home.
What was very unusual is that they get out of the front of the van and went in the back of the van and removed one of the rear windows and substituted one of the windows with a cardboard panel. And although we could not see totally inside the van, we did know they weren't having a bagel and coffee in the back of that van. They were looking to assassinate him.
In New York, agents believe Croatian assassins intend to shoot Pero Vučas as he walks his 6-year-old daughter to school. Vučas has been working with the FBI to identify the terrorists. Special Agent Len Cross warns Vučas to stay inside his apartment.
If they had made an attempt to get out of the car and proceed to his residence, and we saw what would appear to be a weapon. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. They were going to be taken down, period.
Fortunately, Vuchas and his daughter remain hidden, forcing the snipers to abandon their deadly plot.
Still?
The FBI decides to set up electronic surveillance on a man they believe to be the mastermind behind the East Coast bombings, the president of Otpor, Stepan Sajic.
He was directing the operations here in New York, and naturally would be the place to put the wiretap, especially in view of the fact that the individuals came to him, and that's where they had their meetings.
Special Agent Bjarne Borison.
It's very difficult to go into a building and place a wire without leaving any trace that you were there, and the FBI is quite good at that.
What are they talking about?
Very nearby, we set up a listening post, and we'd have at least one translator there at all times.
Their job is to translate Croatian to English,
Pieces are the bomb making.
as well as identify each voice on the tape. They must also decipher any code words used by the terrorists.
They won't come out and say words like dynamite. They may say things or pieces.
The drop-off, which is the device delivery, and the package is the bomb.
It took a while for us to get a grasp as to what are they talking about and get the significance of the phraseology they used.
The conspirators meet often, usually in the rec room in Sacic's basement. Jako Dreven, one of the men who tried to assassinate Pero Vuchas, is Sacic's lieutenant. Translators work day and night, analyzing their conversations.
The wiretap would run 24 hours a day, and we had to constantly monitor the conversations because they're talking about bombing, assassinating people.
Agents are still trying to pin down specifics, places, dates, the identities of the co-conspirators.
It was all part of the puzzle that had all the pieces be pulled together in order to form enough evidence to start the prosecution.
Under federal racketeering laws, the FBI needs hard evidence of a conspiracy to take down the entire organization. Special Agent Ken Maxwell.
One particular night, their shaking of the pinball machine shook loose a wire that was used in the installation of the microphones.
Stop.
It looked like a plain wire. It didn't look like it had a head that a normal microphone would have. So if you saw it, you might even know what it is.
On the other end, the translators can hear the conspirators talking about the wire.
What they were saying was, what is that? And one of them realized rather quickly, because he had done all of the electrical work for the house, I didn't put that wire there.
They knew there was something there that didn't belong there. Now, the next question is, do they know what it is?
The conspirators begin following the wire.
And they traced that wire out of the basement to the power source out on the street and ripped the wire out.
For the FBI, the tap is critical.
To the great credit of our special operations folks, they reinstalled, and they reinstalled within 24 hours. I think the bad guys thought they had won in that instance, not realizing our persistence. And this time, we avoided the pinball machine.
Agents hear Stepan Sajic and Jako Dreven planning an upcoming operation.
They were talking about, let's get ready, I want you to do this, I want you to smash this. And we knew they were getting ready to bomb something.
Agents learn that Otpor intends to bomb a Yugoslav dance studio, scheduled to host a gala attended by the Yugoslav ambassador to the United Nations. Special Agent Len Cross.
They were going to have over 300 people there. At this point, this really raised our concerns because now they're going after groups and not concerned about who gets hurt.
Agents tail Drevin. He drives to Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he visits the home of a man named Vuka Ulich.
When he went into the residence, he went in empty-handed. When he came out, he had a good-sized brown bag, and there seemed to be some bulky stuff inside the bag.
Agents follow Drevin back to New York City, where he picks up another Haute-Pour foot soldier. The men drive on toward their target.
And they circled a block in Manhattan and kept circling it and circling it.
Agents watch as Drevin cases the building. He leaves the suspicious bag behind in the van.
It was decided that if they removed the bag, then we were going to arrest them. Certainly we were not going to take the chance of a potential bombing in Midtown Manhattan.
As the suspect returns to the van, the agents watch his every move, ready to take the terrorists down. In New York, agents tail two suspected Croatian terrorists. An FBI surveillance operation has revealed that a radical faction of Haute-Pour is planning to place a bomb at a reception for 300 people. The terrorists case the building and then leave the area. Agents suspect that they have a bomb in their van. The FBI cannot risk a terror attack on hundreds of innocent people. Agents obtain search warrants to raid the homes of Stepan Sacic and Jako Drevin.
FBI! Up against the wall! Hold it! Hold it right there! Get out! Hold it right there! Hold it right there! Hold it right there! We have one for your arrest. What is this? I don't understand. Just hold it right there. Hold it.
In Drevin's home, Special Agent Ken Maxwell finds a familiar-looking bag in a closet.
When I looked into the shopping bag, I saw a woman's pocketbook that was open. And inside the pocketbook were sticks of dynamite wrapped up in tape, a timing device, an alarm clock, an electric blasting cap, and wire. It's not every day that you find a bomb at your feet.
Authorities take Drevin into custody. Across town, Special Agent Len Cross and his team search the home of Stepan Sacic, the president of Haute-Pour.
One of my team members was going through a pile of paint drop cloths, and he found the scoped rifle and he found the ammunition.
Investigators suspect Sacic's co-conspirators used the rifle weeks earlier in a plot to murder political writer and FBI cooperator Pero Vučas. Agents arrest Sacic for conspiracy under RICO, the federal racketeering statute.
He was advised of his rights, and he refused. He wasn't being very cooperative.
No, I don't think so.
4 days later, FBI agents and police raid the Bridgeport, Connecticut home of Vuka Ulich.
Towards the window. What is all? Face the window.
Ulich provided Drevin with the bomb earmarked for the dance studio.
We have a warrant to search the premises.
A bomb tech, as he moved some clothes, observed there on the floor in a bag considerable amount of dynamite, and sitting on top of the dynamite were electric blasting caps, live electric blasting caps.
Agents arrest Vuka Ulich.
Don't you worry about it. We'll take care of it from here.
Special Agent Cross, you have a heard.
They call Special Agent Cross in New York to inform him they have found one of Haute-Pour's primary bomb makers.
Special Agent Cross.
Cross again questions Stepan Sacic, asking him if he knows a man by the name of Vuka Ulich.
You know a guy from Bridgeport?
He says, yeah, a little I do. I says, you got some problems. And we've just arrested him. I says, he had a large quantity of explosives and caps and weapons in his house.
Sacic still refuses to talk. New York investigators call in Special Agent Bob Gorth from San Francisco to question Ulich. The former Otpur member turned confidential informant accompanies him. Late in the afternoon, with the moral support of the Croatian cooperator, Ulich finally begins to open up.
He wanted the feeling that a fellow Croatian believed in him, trusted him, and he wouldn't be entirely alone. And when he finally got the courage up, he said, yeah, I want to talk about it. And of course, that was the linchpin of the whole case.
Vuka Ulich tells investigators how other Otpur members convinced him to kill a Croatian community leader in California 2 years earlier.
After drinking all one evening and into the morning, he decided he'd strike a blow for Croatian freedom and go kill this enemy of the people. So he did. And later on, he realized that what he'd done was not advancing the Croatian cause, but really was harming it. He was one of the few people that I firmly believe regretted what he did.
Ulich agrees to testify against Sacic, Dreven, and the other Croatian terrorists.
When I killed.
This is the key testimony prosecutors need to take down the entire terrorist ring.
His cooperation in this case was instrumental in breaking the back of an organized crime organization wherein in 4 cities we literally took out the godfathers of 4 families.
The RICO statute, originally enacted to stop organized crime, is used for the first time to fight terrorism. Within 2 years, 11 members of the Otpur organization are convicted and sentenced to up to 40 years in prison.
If you're going to achieve any kind of success in terrorism, you have to be able to bring to the playing field the right kind of players, the right kind of knowledge, and the right kind of resource, if you even hope to put a dent into it.
The Rambo approach is not going to win over terrorists. Terrorists are motivated by an extreme sense of nationalism. And if you're going to deal with them, you've got to get into their hearts and minds. Otherwise, you may stop them on a particular incident, but you haven't changed their minds. If you don't change their minds, they'll do it again.
For the FBI and law enforcement nationwide, dismantling Otpur was a vital achievement. Terrorists operating inside U.S. borders were stopped dead in their tracks. A prominent couple, respected in the community, are stabbed to death in their own home. Nothing about the case makes sense. Not the crime scene, the motive, or even the forensic evidence. Stabbing is a personal crime. There's often a relationship between the victim and the killer. A task force of agents and police quickly learn nothing about this case is usual.
Edna, New Hampshire is a small town. It's the kind of place where people trust their neighbors and leave their doors unlocked. A double murder shattered that trust and left the entire community terrified. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI and local police work day and night trying to find a motive for the brutal crime.
January 27th, 2001, Etna, Vermont. At 6:30 p.m., Carol Johnson stops by the home of her friends Suzanne and Half Zantop. Carol's supposed to have dinner with the couple.
Suzanne?
It's not like them to forget a dinner engagement.
I'm here. Anybody home?
In the study, she makes a gruesome discovery. The room is in shambles. The friends are on the floor. Blood is everywhere. Seven minutes after receiving the dispatch, the Hanover police are on the scene. Eric Bates is a detective with the Hanover Police Department.
And I went into the door.
By the time I got there, some of the information had been relayed as to the nature of what had happened, that there were at least 2 bodies.
Carol tells police that the victims were both prominent professors at nearby Dartmouth College. Half Zantop was an earth sciences professor. His wife Suzanne was the chair of the German Studies program. Carol is their colleague. They'd invited her for dinner at 6:30 that evening.
Great, good to see you guys. See you tonight.
The Zantop house was extremely neat, orderly, clean. Nothing was out of place. There was a 2-level home, no basement.
Check upstairs.
The house hadn't been secured, and so that's when myself and one of the patrol sergeants went through the house and systematically cleared the house to make sure that the killers weren't still in the house for some reason. I can tell you I've never seen anything as horrific as the scene itself in the study of the Zantop home. Even with my military experience then and even now, nothing would compare to the scene that night. It was potentially a murder-suicide. And if not, and it was a double homicide, it appeared to me as though they were preparing a light meal. It was my impression that they were actually preparing a lunch and not a dinner.
Although the bodies were discovered at dinner time, Bates suspects the Zantops died early that afternoon before lunch, and that the couple has been dead for several hours.
There was so many valuables in that house that we wouldn't have even begun to know what was missing. We discovered some blood droppings and a bloody boot print, what appeared to be a boot print anyway, on the floor. It was right next to the Zantop's fireplace, and it's a wood fireplace.
Bates' first concern is to preserve the evidence.
The closest thing that was nearby was some kindling wood, some small kindling. So I basically cordoned off each blood dropping or footprint that I could find in hopes that later they could be analyzed.
The Hanover Police is a small-town department. They have limited resources. They'll need all the help they can get if they're going to solve this terrifying and puzzling crime. Because of the size of the Hanover PD, the Major Crimes Unit of the New Hampshire State Police comes in to investigate the murder.
We're one of the few departments that have a full-time homicide unit.
Sergeant Mark Mudgett is the lead investigator with the Major Crimes Unit of the New Hampshire State Police.
Sergeant Mudgett, we have probably a lot more experience than a lot of the local departments in being able to handle investigations of this magnitude.
All right, guys, here's the
investigators analyze the study, the primary crime scene.
As you look at the crime scene, if you're patient enough and you're willing to look, stop, and listen and take in all that information, positioning of the bodies, the physical evidence located inside that room, if you listen, that body will speak to you. It will tell you what happened. It will give you clues as to how it happened. It will tell you potentially who may have committed this particular crime.
Suzanne Zantop's body was lying near the door of the study. Her husband's body was further in the room. An upturned chair was at his feet, and 2 other chairs were set up near the desk. At It looked like a conversation had taken place in the room. Near the two chairs, police make a startling discovery.
Got something under here.
As we started to process the inside of the study area, we immediately came across two black tactical-style knife sheaths. These knife sheaths were approximately 9 to 10 inches in length. Both of them were identical.
Police assume the missing knives were used to kill the Xantops. They could be the murder weapons, and 2 murder weapons could mean 2 killers. In the living room, they follow the blood trail leading from the study to the front door. Tom Pfeiffer is the director of the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory. He is relieved to see that the blood evidence has been carefully preserved.
This is a highly unusual and actually some of the best part of preserving the crime scene that could have occurred. This eliminated people entering the crime scene from actually stepping and obliterating or contaminating the footwear impression evidence.
Sergeant Mudgett notes that the front door is unlocked. There is no sign of forced entry into the house. Right now, all the investigators have are a few answers and a growing list of questions.
Did they invite the perpetrator or perpetrators into this? Or the questions that continue to go through your mind are, is this somebody that's known to the Xantops?
Near the fireplace, Pfeiffer finds the bloody boot print.
I wanted to enhance those impressions for better comparison purposes. I processed those with a blood enhancement reagent referred to as leuco, crystal violet, or LCV. Upon application of the LCV, the impression was further enhanced to the point where it was going to be able to be used in identification purposes.
Once a suspect is in custody, the boot print could be important evidence for prosecutors. In 2001, Mike Delaney was the Assistant Attorney General for the Homicide Unit of the New Hampshire Attorney General's Office.
In New Hampshire, anytime a suspicious death is discovered, there's an immediate notification to prosecutors who are immediately dispatched to the scene to help the investigators with the case. In this case, our victims were loved and esteemed professors from an Ivy League college campus, and that made this case very unique. It was clear that the level of violence that had been inflicted on the Xantops was over and above anything that was necessary for the purpose of carrying out a crime, including a potential killing. In that regard, it had the hallmarks of a crime of passion, of somebody that acted out with a level of violence that was personal in nature.
In addition to the unlocked door, the extreme violence of the murders, it appears to be what investigators call overkill, is more evidence that the Xantops might have known their killers. If the killers knew their victims, then police are looking for someone who hated the Xantops enough to brutally stab them to death. Whoever committed this crime is a cold-blooded killer and must be stopped. But police must find them first. To do that, they need a motive, something to explain this heinous crime. In Etna, Vermont, 2 prominent professors are murdered, stabbed to death in their own home. Investigators suspect whoever killed the Xantops will try to leave town as soon as possible. They check the local airport, the bus station, and finally a local cab company.
How about that right there?
According to the dispatcher, one of the drivers picked up a local college student the night of January 27th. It was late, after midnight. The student was going to Manchester Airport. Investigators quickly established the student flew home due to a family emergency. With With no other leads, they assume the killers either left town by car or are still somewhere in the area. By morning, the double homicide is headline news. The Zantops were prominent citizens. According to the medical examiner's office, wounds on the Zantop's body are consistent with a tactical combat knife. Mark Mudgett is assistant commander of the Major Crime Unit for the New Hampshire State Police.
Based on the injuries that we found on Half and Susanna at the time of autopsy, they had both sustained numerous stab wounds. Susanna had been stabbed 11 times and Half had been stabbed 10 times in various portions of their body. Their throats had been cut. Stabbing is a very personal crime. It's not something that you can accomplish at a distance of 12, 13, 14 feet like you can with a firearm. A stabbing is something that's a very personal crime. You have to get up close to the individual to be able to affect the damage that the offender wants to affect on these people.
Once again, the evidence suggests the Zantops knew their killers. The knife sheaths are now investigators' best clue to finding them. Tom Pfeiffer is the director of the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Lab.
There were fingerprints developed on the back of one of the knife sheaths left in the Zantop study. We then searched those fingerprints through the fingerprint identification system in our laboratory.
Investigators searched the NCIS database, comparing fingerprints found on the knife sheaths to a database containing the fingerprints of known offenders. They can't find a match.
The fact that we did not receive a match back from the fingerprint search leads us to several different conclusions. One, the person is not in the database, which means they haven't been arrested. Two, the fingerprints were such a quality that was not able to make a match with the computer. Or three, the person could have been arrested, however, the fingerprints, for some reason or another, did not make it into the database.
Police turned to their next best clue, a bloody boot print found at the scene.
We had to collect all the footwear evidence from everyone that entered the scene. There were about 14 pairs of footwear of personnel that had been into the crime scene. We collected all those pieces of footwear from the neighbors to the EMTs to the medical examiner to our own Attorney General's office.
Good impression of that. Great impression.
The forensics lab is able to eliminate all 14 pairs of footwear. Pfeiffer suspects the boot print belongs to one of the killers.
I scanned a photograph of this particular footwear impression at the crime scene, emailed that image down to the FBI laboratory in their footwear section, asked them to do a search of their database that contains thousands of outsole pattern designs.
The FBI lab tells Pfeiffer that the footwear impression was made by an upscale brand of hiking boots. It's a good clue, but until investigators have a suspect, it's meaningless.
There's an awful lot of information that has to be processed once you take part in processing the crime scene and the physical evidence. That's just one aspect of this investigation, or any investigation. Now you have to start seeking out persons for information.
In this case, that was quite a challenge. Everyone knew Huff and Susanna Zantop. They had extensive faculty connections. They had hundreds of students that were in classes with them.
Investigators head to the college where the Zantops worked to learn all they can about their victims.
So realistically, our investigation just blew up in 360 degrees. You had to just start putting your feelers out. You had to start generating leads. You had to start interviewing a lot of people on campus, off campus, relatives, neighbors.
Altercations with anyone?
Well, maybe about a couple of days ago.
During the course of the interviews that we were doing on campus, we generated a person of interest who was a student of Hal Zantop's.
Can you tell me what that was about?
No, because they spoke Spanish.
According to a student, Half Zantop argued with one of his students just days before he was murdered.
We're pretty much going to wrap it up for today.
Professor Hub? Sí. Yo necesito hablar para mi clave en declaración. Una tarea aquí. Yo necesito para mi graduación.
Police questioned the student.
It was reported to us that he had a extensive knife collection.
What kind of knives are they? They're collector's items.
When we conducted the actual interview with the individual, we also noted that he had sustained a recent abrasion to his head. So we were hoping that we were, onto something.
Why do you want to see my hand? Because I want to see your hand.
The student voluntarily submits to questioning. He tells police he'd been friendly with Half Zantop ever since he took the professor's earth science class. He explains he was just joking around with Professor Zantop.
We were laughing in Spanish.
Investigators look into the student's background, but he has a solid alibi on the day of the murders. He could not have killed the Zantops. Police also investigate the Zantops' relationships with their colleagues.
Popular professors on the campus.
On campus, they learn that Half Zantop had recently been given a position instead of another professor.
Recently, in the last.
We had to travel out to where the gentleman lived in the western part of the United States to interview him because he had come and gone from the Hanover area out about the time that the homicide had occurred or shortly thereafter.
The professor's car is impounded. There appear to be blood stains in the trunk. Analysis reveals that the stains are not blood. According to the owner of the vehicle, they were made by stew that spilled in the trunk. While investigators follow every lead, two detectives work to try and find the murder weapons. They visit retail stores in the area that specialize in knives.
The scabbards that we had, the knife sheaths that we had, were produced for one type of blade, one type of knife. The blade itself is really a paramilitary or a tactical type of tool. Our armed forces use them, a lot of police agencies utilize them. This is not something that is a tool that's going to be used by the average hiker or the average individual.
6 days after the killings, the knife manufacturer supplies New Hampshire authorities with a list of all authorized retailers and distributors in the country, broken down by state. In addition, there are hundreds of dealers nationwide that sell the knives on the internet.
Based on the research we did with the manufacturer, we were able to determine that we were going to have to track down approximately 5,000 blades and knives, scabbards, that were produced and distributed worldwide. We didn't have a considerable amount of manpower to be able to do that.
The investigators need help and call in the FBI. At the time, Brian Fitzel was a special agent assigned to the Bedford, New Hampshire resident agency of the FBI.
Just give me the FBI office.
They knew that it would encompass different states and even international because of the nationality of the Zantops. So they knew that they'd be reaching well outside of the New Hampshire borders and wanted us to be able to help with those kind of leads.
Along with state and local police, the FBI joins the Hanover Task Force.
This was front page news, and consistently the state police, the attorney general, was asking anyone with information, please call. And the volume of leads that were coming in were tremendous. You know, phone calls, people calling in with information.
The FBI deploys Rapid Start, a computer system. It is a database designed to track hundreds or even thousands of leads.
In any type of investigation, you need to keep your peripheral vision open. You don't want to miss anything. If you're too quick to focus in on one area, you start to disregard other telltale signs or other signs that you may or may not be on the right track.
As investigators struggle to make sense of their case, all over the country, media coverage of the case explodes. For law enforcement, the pressure is on to find a pair of brutal killers. In New Hampshire, 2 Ivy League professors have been brutally murdered in their own home. Investigators review the evidence again.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's sloppy.
They are trying to determine if the Xantops were targeted. It doesn't appear that they were. A knife is too clumsy a murder weapon for an assassination. Also, the killers made amateurish mistakes. If the murder had been planned, why would they leave behind the knife sheaths, a footprint, and even a fingerprint? Ironically, despite the evidence found at the scene, they're beginning to question whether the Xantops had any connection to their killers at all. Supervisory Special Agent Brian Fitzel.
It was looking, as this progressed more and more, that it was not an acquaintance that committed these acts.
Investigators can also rule out robbery. According to the initial investigation, nothing was taken from the house.
It was a murder scene that didn't match a lot of the known or the experience that most of these investigators have worked many homicides. It didn't fit into their normal model. It wasn't apparent that there was any motive other than the killing itself. It was as if these people were killed and the culprits ran right out the door.
Agents contact the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group in Quantico, Virginia. Investigators want to understand how these killers' minds work. They turn to the profilers.
They'll actually see hundreds of homicide cases during a year, and so they actually develop an expertise and they can see patterns because they see so many cases.
Supervisory Special Agent Jim Fitzgerald is a criminal investigative analyst, a profiler. He finds the case unusual.
We have two low-risk victims who are killed in their own house in broad daylight on a Saturday, nonetheless, when other people ostensibly in the neighborhood are home.
This is the crime scene. It appears that everything
Fitzgerald notes that the position of the chairs makes it appear as if an impromptu conference was going on prior to the murders.
The only thing that's in the doorway.
It was agreed upon with the investigators in the room and myself that it looks like there may have been at least several minutes in which there was some sort of conversation between Hoff and one or both of the offenders. It seems that the offender or offenders, and we were leaning towards two offenders at this point, were mission-oriented in that when they came into the house, their purpose was to kill Mr. and Mrs. Xantop.
The murder weapon, a pair of combat knives, is particularly troubling.
The use of a weapon in a homicide is very significant to your type of offender. If it's a cheap Saturday night special as opposed to a very expensive pistol with a silencer, that tells you have two different sort of offenders there. And on the other end of the continuum, on even a lower end of the continuum, if someone's using a knife, that tells you a lot about your offender too.
Been able to determine what type of knife it actually was. It's like a...
The fact that the killers used knives and left behind crucial evidence tells him they are either sloppy or unsophisticated. Investigators suspect that the Xantops either knew their killers or allowed them into the house for some unknown reason. Fitzgerald is starting to get a picture of the killers, but the extreme level of violence troubles him.
When we're seeing a case that it makes no sense for various reasons, from a profiling perspective, we automatically hit the default to youthfulness. We just may have someone here youthful, that the motivation is not about money, the motivation is not to get back to somebody or even up a grudge. It's, hey, we're youthful and our filtering system in our brain hasn't kicked in yet, so I know, let's go out and just hurt or kill someone.
He fears he may be looking at some kids who killed just for the thrill of it.
That went bad.
On February 9th, a list of the killer's post-offensive behavior compiled by the FBI profilers is released to the public. Investigators ask the public to recall if they noticed anyone exhibiting odd behavior around the time of the murders, or changing their appearance, missing work, or having unexplained injuries or bruises on the hands or arms. Calls pour into the task force. None of the leads pan out. After 2 weeks of non-stop work, investigators have hit a dead end. Nothing about the Xantop murder makes sense. Seems like a crime without a motive. With each passing day, the community becomes more desperate. 2 murderers are at large, and law enforcement still has no idea why they chose the Xantops and who their next victim might be. In New Hampshire, a task force of state and local police and FBI agents tried to determine why someone murdered 2 Dartmouth professors in their own home.
There was no discernible motive that we could come up with as to why these people would be killed.
Supervisory Special Agent Jim Fitzgerald is an FBI profiler assigned to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit.
We were told initially that there was nothing missing from the house. We found out about a week or so later that, in fact, something was missing from the house.
Agents learn Half Xantop always carried a wallet, and his wallet has never been recovered.
Prior to us learning that the wallet was missing, it almost appeared like a motiveless crime.
Now that they know one of the victims' wallets is missing, it changes everything.
We said this could be a little bit different now, and this may have been a quote-unquote simple robbery gone very, very bad.
Gentlemen, I just have some new information.
If the motive was indeed robbery, investigators have only a handful of clues found at the scene. 2 unidentified fingerprints, an unidentified boot print, and 2 empty knife sheaths. The task force focuses on the knife sheaths and finding the murder weapons.
There's really a point in an investigation where you provide the behavioral work as much as you can, and then you have to sit back and let the gumshoe work take place.
Check this out.
Working with the manufacturer, investigators work to track down the sale of 5,000 combat knives all over the country.
This is all the dealers of that blade? It's about 5,000 of them.
In addition to questioning retail dealers in the area, investigators research dealers who sell combat knives over the internet. On February 14th, they contact an internet retailer in Massachusetts. Supervisory Special Agent Brian Fitzel.
2 of the knives had been purchased by an individual in Vermont within, 20 miles of the crime scene.
Bells started going off and flags were raised that we may have a good break here.
The purchase of 2 identical combat knives is an extraordinary lead. Investigators follow up immediately. The 2 knives were purchased by a man named James Parker. He lives across the state line in Chelsea, Vermont. Mark Mudgett is assistant commander of the Major Crime Unit for the New Hampshire State Police.
When we made the initial contact with the occupants of the home, we were somewhat shocked at the fact that it was purchased by a juvenile.
Jimmy!
James Parker is only 16 years old.
What's going on? You James Parker? Yes. We want to talk to you about some knives.
James Parker had indicated that he had bought 2 knives at that time. That he'd bought one for himself and one for a friend of his, a gentleman by the name of Robert Tulloch. That they had purchased the knives so they could use them while they were rock climbing.
Oh, well, when we
Detectives ask Parker where the knives are now.
So we took them to a local Army and Navy.
He tells them the knives were big. The boys decided they were too heavy for rock climbing and sold them at an Army-Navy store.
The trooper said that the hair on the back of his neck was standing up because when he started this interview, he had the feeling that this was not a legitimate story.
Investigators asked Parker if he'd be willing to answer a few questions at the police station.
Is it okay if I tag along? It'd be fine.
Parker agrees to be interviewed.
There you go, son.
And then the investigators went to interview his partner. And again, same story, that didn't really measure up.
What happened to the knives?
Me and my
17-year-old Robert Tulloch corroborates Parker's story.
We realized that the knives were too heavy for us, so...
The knives were too heavy. The boys sold them for $60 apiece to a stranger at the Army-Navy store in Burlington, Vermont.
60 for both.
Do you have any kind of footwear, shoes, boots, anything like that?
Investigators are immediately suspicious. Tulloch's statement is not just close to Parker's, it's virtually identical. It's as if the 2 boys memorized their statements beforehand. Then the detective notices something chilling.
He noticed that the footwear was the make and model of the hiking boot that we were looking at. So, I mean, he knew very early on this was probably somebody involved in this crime scene.
They want to take you down to headquarters.
He did a very good job of maintaining the interview because this was, you know, no arrest warrants were in hand. He went out there to find out about the knives and then very quickly realized that he was dealing with one of the murderers right there.
Robert Tulloch agrees to accompany detectives to the Chelsea Sheriff's Office to be fingerprinted. Despite investigators' suspicions, without solid evidence to support an arrest warrant, they are unable to detain Tulloch or Parker. Deputy State Attorney General Mike Delaney.
They had no prior history with criminal activity. They cooperated with the police when they arrived. They voluntarily provided information and fingerprints and shoes.
He's free to go.
They place a late-night call to Tom Pfeiffer, the director of the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory.
I received a telephone call at 12 o'clock midnight requesting my assistance to the laboratory to do a comparison between a pair of boots that were recovered from a suspect in this case to those impressions that were developed at the crime scene.
In order to obtain an arrest warrant, investigators need proof that Robert Tulloch's boots match the bloody boot print found at the crime scene.
The pressure that was surrounding this particular case was enormous. I've never worked in a case in our state that had this much amount of pressure. If anything, it caused us to actually step back and recheck and double and triple check our work before we let anything out of this laboratory. This is your career on the line. If you make one misidentification, you might as well leave the world of forensics behind because you could never do another case.
Dr. Pfeiffer compares an impression taken from Tulloch's boots to an impression taken at the Zantop house.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, a colleague and myself made a match between the impressions left at the crime scene and the boots that were taken from the suspect.
The fingerprints collected from the scene match Parker's.
We knew that we were dealing with our murderers, and the two murderers knew that as well because after the state troopers left, these kids left that night. They got together and fled. So they gave fingerprints and footwear and then went into fugitive mode.
After weeks of searching, agents and police finally identify their suspects, only to lose them. 2 deadly teenage killers are now on the loose. Forensic evidence has implicated 2 teens, James Parker and Robert Tulloch, in a brutal double murder.
Detective Eric Bates with Hanover Police.
Armed with warrants, police travel to the boys' homes.
To check your house if you don't have a problem.
Both of them live with their parents in the small town of Chelsea, Vermont.
No, I really don't. I have no idea.
When we got into Chelsea that morning, and it was early in the morning, we had learned that they had both fled during the night, telling each other's parents that they were both going to be with the other family.
Detective Eric Bates questions Robert Tulloch's parents. They have no idea where their son is.
It was difficult to deal with the parents of these killers. Knowing the information that we had, you learned that the family members were good people and that, unfortunately, their children had become murderers.
In Tulloch's bedroom, investigators make a crucial discovery. Inside a cardboard box, they find 2 combat knives.
Got him. Oh, good.
In their statements, Parker and Tulloch claimed they sold the knives to a stranger. Investigators have found the murder weapons. Mike Delaney is a deputy attorney general working with the homicide unit.
Once we had the knives in the bedroom, it was pretty clear what we were dealing with, and at that point, I think everyone had solidified the opinions that they, in fact, were involved directly in committing these crimes.
This is where we are. The problem is that Hanover...
The case transformed once Parker and Tulloch had fled. They had shifted gears, basically, from an investigative trying to ferret out who had caused this now to an actual pursuit. The momentum increased, the intensity increased, but it gave us a great deal of satisfaction that we were able to identify who the perpetrators were in this crime.
A bolo, or be on the lookout, is issued for two teenage boys driving a silver 1987 Audi. They are wanted for questioning in connection with the Zantop murders.
You never know what's inside the mind of a person, what they're actually going to do when confronted, but certainly from a law enforcement perspective and for the general public's sake, you have to assume the worst in that regard, and we did. An axiom by which we live in the profiling business is that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So by all means, these two were considered armed and dangerous, and all the relevant agencies and states that were contacted were told that, be very careful when confronting these two, because they've killed already.
Parker and Tulloch's pictures appear in newspapers and on television throughout the country.
The FBI issued the UFAP, the unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, to help us in our fugitive investigation. What that allows is the FBI can turn up a lot of resources on a UFAP.
In Massachusetts, a state trooper finds an abandoned car at a truck stop. It is a silver 1987 Audi. The trooper calls in the license plates. Within minutes, he knows that the car belongs to James Parker. Agents converge on the truck stop. An employee remembers seeing two clean-cut teenage boys asking truckers for a ride to California.
They were both looking for rides that day.
According to the truck stop employee, one of the boys had dark hair. He wore it spiked. The other boy was blonde. They called themselves Sam and Tyler.
Yeah, that's cool.
We were able to effectively narrow the time of our trail to their original leaving of the vehicle in Sturbridge, Massachusetts rest area.
In Sturbridge, the two boys hitched a ride with a husband and wife trucking team. They dropped the boys off at another rest stop.
Let's determine what type of truck they left in from there, based on those aggressive application of FBI resources, immediately sending people to these rest areas.
The FBI moves fast. They notify trucking companies and dispatchers that the two teenage boys are wanted. They are believed to be armed and dangerous. Authorities learn the two teenage boys might have been spotted at a truck stop in Columbia, New Jersey. According to witnesses, they hitched a ride with another trucker.
We were narrowing the chase because as our information was getting better, it was clear to us where we thought they were heading.
Agents notify police all over the region that the fugitives seem to be heading west. February 19th, 4 a.m. 3 weeks after the double homicide, the sheriff in Newcastle, Indiana, listens to the chatter on his CB radio. He hears a trucker ask if somebody can give a ride to two boys from New Jersey. They want to go to California. He does not reveal he is a police officer and quickly tells the trucker he'd be happy to give the boys a ride. He instructs the trucker to drop them off at a nearby truck stop. The officer speeds to intercept them. According to the bolo, the suspects are armed and dangerous. Along the way, he calls for backup. He may have found the killers. In Indiana, A sheriff attempts to trap two teenage fugitives at a truck stop. 16-year-old James Parker and 17-year-old Robert Tulloch are both wanted for the brutal slaying of two prominent professors. At the truck stop, the officer asks the two boys for their names.
What's your name?
Tyler J. Jones.
Tyler J. Jones. What's the J stand for?
Jeffrey.
Tyler Jason Jones?
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey. Okay. Where are you from?
We're from Encino, California.
Can you spell that?
E-N-S.
How about you? What's your social security number? You don't remember it right now? Hold on a second. Copy that. I've got the description. That's you? You heard that? We've got the suspects here. We identified themselves. Guys, come over here. We're in the car.
He takes Parker and Tulloch into custody.
Cooperation and future testimony we're looking at.
James Parker was brought back to the state of New Hampshire along with Robert Tulloch. Adult certification hearing was commenced against James Parker, and he was ultimately deemed to stand trial as an adult for the murders of Hal and Susanna Zantop.
Just to steal some money.
Once he was certified as an adult,
Steal cards and credit card information.
James Parker's attorneys approached the state of New Hampshire in wanting him to offer testimony against Robert Tulloch.
James Parker ended up cooperating with law enforcement and was interviewed extensively by the New Hampshire State Police and the Attorney General's office.
James Parker pleads guilty to a reduced charge, accomplice to second-degree murder. In exchange, he agrees to testify against his best friend. He tells police the chilling tale of what happened on the day the Zantops were murdered.
Try something.
What materialized is the fact that these two guys were bored with their life in Vermont, that they envisioned going to Australia or some far-off place. They originally decided that they were going to rob somebody and take their ATM card or something to that effect, take $10,000 and fly to Australia.
Hey, I've got a question. Our car
They
broke down.
came up with the idea of knocking on somebody's door and saying that they had car trouble, can we come in to use your phone? And when
I don't think so.
they tried this in Vermont, the person felt very strongly that these two were up to no good and slammed the door in their face and said, get off my property. He was very close to being a victim of that. Well, when their pretext for broken car didn't meet with good results, they changed it to students conducting a survey for their school.
Hey, we're doing a school.
So they showed up at the Zantops' house totally at random, and unfortunately, the fact that Hoff and Susanna were college professors led them to be very open and trusting of students and invite them into their home.
Come on in.
And in the office environment where Hoff was murdered, it was clear that he was sitting at his desk conversing with these two students who were writing their pretend notes and interviewing him, and and then the signal was given to murder him in cold blood right in his office.
Just a couple of survey questions. What's your favorite?
Suzanne and Half Zantop were teachers.
Is your wife the only person in this house?
They believed in helping students.
Okay. Well, how long have you been married, and what do you do?
Tragically, their dedication led to their deaths.
You know what?
Deaths at the hands of two teenagers who agents suspect may have killed simply for the thrill of it.
Their goal was to commit a violent act, and the Zantops just happened to be in the wrong place, in the wrong time, in their own home. And how unfortunate is that?
When these perpetrators were interviewed after the fact, one of them made the admission that they had realized that they had left the sheaths and had given thought about coming back to the house to retrieve them. And I believe that they said when they went past the house, with that in mind, the police presence was already there.
Investigators are searching for some way to explain why Tulloch and Parker murdered the Zantops so brutally.
What you guys doing?
FBI profiler James Fitzgerald sees this type of random violence as part of a terrifying trend.
We live in a different society today. Even in our youthful culture, they're constantly exposed to violence. And I believe Parker and Tulloch fit right into that category. The motivation's not to get back to somebody or even up a grudge. So I know, let's go out and just hurt or kill someone. And we're seeing more and more of that, unfortunately.
When you left there that night, where did you guys go?
We spent considerable amount of time with him, several days, as he went through how he and Robert Tulloch had concocted and eventually perpetrated this crime. He showed no signs of emotion, no signs of remorse for what he had done.
I stabbed the Zantops.
They were from more or less a middle-class environment, low crime area. Did not have some of the pitfalls that maybe others may be forced to experience in lesser environments. But nonetheless, there was a dysfunctionality about them. And when their chemistry was mixed, a violent outcome was apparently inevitable.
Investigators will never know what it was about the two boys and their chemistry that triggered such rage. In April 2002, James Parker is convicted of second-degree murder. He is sentenced to 25 years in prison. Robert Tulloch is convicted of first-degree murder. He is sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole.